Okay, now can you all hear me? Let me know now, okay? रोज टेक्निकल डिफिकल्टीज में थोड़ा टाइम. Hello, is the audio fine now? There's a lag obviously. Okay, audio is fine now. So what I was saying is that today we are going to discuss the so-called most peaceful religion in the world. You see, anyone who claims to be a peaceful religion ends up being the most damaging. So the most peaceful religion, who when you hear the word Buddhism or Buddhist, all that comes to your mind is nice incense sticks burning here and there, nice ambient music playing, cool quotes, a nice anime, everything calm and peaceful things. But when it comes to persecuting minorities, their history is almost at the top. In the modern world, at least, they have persecuted Hindus in Sri Lanka. They have persecuted Christians in Myanmar. They have persecuted Rohingyas, who are Bengali Muslim Chittagongians, essentially. So let's. I have found many nice articles and papers, scholarly articles on JSTOR and other elsewhere as well, and I'm going to check out some of them today. And we'll in subsequent days we will also get into the specifics of their religion, which also might end up leading them to be violent. Theravada Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism. Yeah, peaceful religion today in this context means something else. Okay, let's get to the articles. I really overslept today. That's why I got late. I apologize, but I forgot the audio was not coming. So yeah, sorry for that. And thanks a lot for joining such late into the night. Okay, first let's check this one out. These are small articles. We'll get to about 2 to 3 articles today, I think. Let's check out hijacking Buddha Dharma, violence and war in Buddhist societies. Okay, we are back in JSTOR, so it's going to be tough on my eyes. Violence and War in Buddhist Societies. This paper is by Alejandro Chavez Segura. Okay, I'll leave the comment section live on from my phone, okay? Wait a while. So the Buddhists claim that the absolute weird Buddhist pushback that I'm getting from my posts is that Buddha existed before Hinduism somehow. After that, Brahmins came. I've noticed this among Buddhists and Muslims and even leftists to some extent, that everything happened before Hinduism now, apparently. And then magically Brahmins appeared on the face of the earth and then led everything to waste. That's the narrative from the Bangladeshi Muslims and Buddhists of India. I was checking out some Buddhist channels as well. They were saying the pehle to Buddha tha, sab theek tha, then Brahman aa gaye and everything got screwed up. So you see, pretty soon next generation of Muslims and Christians will end up saying that, yeah, first we were here, the British were here, then the Brahmins came about and kicked away and caused genocide of British people. So yeah, too many peaceful religions available now. Don't know which to vote for. Okay. The recent upsurge of religious violence in Burma between Buddhists and Rohingya Muslims, and the weak balance between the Sinhalese Buddhists and Tamil Hindus in Sri Lanka have sparked concerns regarding the justification of violence in Buddhism. If a core tenet of Buddhist ethics is non-violence in thought and action, so-called, how can Buddhists engage in violent conflict? What does it mean to talk about the ethics of war within the context of Buddhism? Is there a moral code condoning, that means encouraging a certain degree of violence, in order to protect the Buddha or Dharma, which is the teachings of the Buddha, which also covers the meanings of truth, law, order, and duty. Yes, that's what Dharma means. Or the protection of the Sangha, community of practitioners. Is it possible to kill a sentient being without facing karmic consequences? How should we understand violence and war in order to find an antidote to overcome them? Afin is saying a bit of violence is good. We Hindus ourselves have forgotten this, thus we suffer from the two imperialist regions, ahimsa, parmo dharmo, dharmo himsa, tada vicha. Yes, a little bit of violence is good, but what they did to Hindu Tamils and Rohingyas, that's not a bit of violence. Okay, so that's the slippery slope we need to stay away from. These are essential questions to consider when seeking to understand first the Buddhist approach to the contingent reality of war and violence, and second, how individuals can construct a more compassionate world through an intersubjective consensus rooted in compassion and loving kindness. This requires exploring core tenets of Buddhist thought, such as the precept of no killing, the causal logic of karma. Causal logic of karma or action, the law of cause and effect of our intentions and actions, and how compassion and loving kindness provide the guidelines to construct a better society. Individuals with political or religious power may aim to legitimize their violent policies by presenting them as religious duties, as will be explained in the case of Sri Lanka. We are able to spot this hijacking of religious ideas by highlighting their basic conditions with core Buddhist tenets. And this is what the new Ambedkarite Buddhists are also doing. They are hijacking Buddhism. We don't need to be hateful of exactly what Buddhism teaches. We have a problem with the modern day Indian Ambedkarite, so-called Ambedkarite Buddhists. Okay, so and their rhetoric on Hindus is as vile and poisonous and evil and basically indecent as Muslims. Even Muslims don't do it on the face of it. Muslims do it in remote areas, in remote villages. In the mainstream, Muslims mostly go around giving that biryani and sherwani and Urdu poetry, Sufi music kind of vibe. Okay, Buddhists are much more, Indian Buddhists are much more vicious when it comes to attacking Hinduism and hating Hinduism. Buddhists, on at least in daily practice, are way more Hindu-phobic and anti-Hindu than Muslims. Nihilist, I announced this earlier, that's why I'm doing this today. Because I found the paper just half an hour back after I woke up. So we'll have to do it next Thursday. Today is Thursday, right? Yeah, next Thursday we are doing Meenakshi Jain's paper on Indian history syllabus. Ashoka was also violent. Yeah, Ashoka killed 18,000 Ajivikas in Bengal. That Ajivika sect, Ajivika Sampradaya disappeared. वो संप्रदाय आज है ही नहीं. We don't even know what were their stands. We know a few basic tenets. Imagine एक संप्रदाय को पूरा उड़ा दिया off the face of the planet Earth. And remember one thing, that the Mauryan Empire did not fall apart after many decades after Ashoka's death. Ashoka was such a big failed king that the Mauryan Empire set out by Chandragupta Maurya and his son, it failed in Ashoka's lifetime. Okay, Ashoka was that bad a king, and he is considered great because of the Buddhist Marxist narrative and nexus in India. Ashoka the not so, yeah. Nihilist is, I guess, a little sad, but I really like the paper abstract and stuff. I read it a little bit. We're going to do it on Thursday. So we are talking about people who are hijacking Buddhism. By that we mean Sri Lankan Buddhist genocidal maniacs, Myanmar Buddhist genocidal maniacs, and Indian Buddhists who hate Hindus and would like to do this on us. Okay, this is the main issue that we need to be aware of. What the Buddhists are doing in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, The Indian Buddhists also want to do this in their minds, but they just don't have that big of a manpower as of yet. That is why they align themselves with Muslims so much and leftists. Then they can form a big enough coalition to to raise hell on Hindus essentially. Yes, he was known as Chandashok. Therefore, this paper aims to examine inaccuracies and biased interpretations of Buddhism, whether by monks, lay people, or policymakers. And remember, if Buddhists in Myanmar are doing this, then there are Buddhists in India who are also doing this. Just misinterpreting Buddhist texts. In particular, it is essential to look at the role of religious leaders in justifying violence through egotistical exegesis of sacred texts and even post-canonical writings. Post-canonical meanings later interpolations. Oh, you saw a Sangam video on Sri Lanka? Nice. I'll have to check it out. This can be seen among Buddhist monks in Sri Lanka, the so-called soldier Zen in Japan during the Asia. Oh yeah, we keep forgetting about Japan because they allied with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. But remember, the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs did have some justification to be dropped on them. They were absolutely genocidal maniacs who were going around doing the biggest war crimes you can imagine. We associate only USA with war crimes. Japan has done their fair share of war crimes. All these war crimes were done being the so-called peaceful, nice monks and chanting people. All day smelling incense sticks in their Buddhist monasteries. They are always going around doing genocides at any chance they get. Which basically brings me to the core idea that yes, humans will end up being bad. How can you organize themselves in the most peaceful of ways? That's where Hinduism comes in. And then when some Hindus also screw up the game and don't understand what it is all about, and then they going out doing atrocities. There are no atrocities. There are one or two things. Let's say casteism, obviously. So they are reflections of the general bad people that there are in any society. So since Hindus get the blame for the bad Hindus, we are going to find out every goddamn bad Buddhist, bad Muslim, bad Christian as well. So the Zen, soldier Zen in Japan during the Asia Pacific War, Mongolian Buddhist Khans and monastics after the second conversion to Buddhism in the late 16th century, and the group of Buddhists in China who during the Korean War supported the quote-unquote new communist family. Individuals like the Venerable Juzan and the Venerable Tongyuan both affirmed in the latter case that quote, Buddhists should fight against the invaders who dare to violate the peace. तो ये फाइट इनको अभी याद आया है. इंडिया में जब था तब भाग गए सब यहाँ से, या तो मार दिए गए. अब उनका ब्लेम भी ब्राह्मण को देता है. Hindu is a broader idea, so it is more accommodative. Yeah. This article will briefly describe the rationale of the so-called Holy War, the contradictory approach of using violence in defense of Buddhism, looking specifically at Sri Lanka, and the role of Buddhism in constructing a compassionate society by practicing the core tenets of Buddha Dharma. This so-called way of the Buddha includes his teachings and the inner experiences or realizations of the practitioner. Okay, we have just read the abstract of this paper. Okay, let me check out another PDF. Let me show you the synopsis of that as well, so that we can decide which paper to read first. Okay, here, this is another one. Yeah, check this out. This paper is called Buddhist Extremism in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Source देखो, Counter Terrorist Trends and Analysis 2019 का पेपर है, published by International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research. Synopsis: This article examines the rise of radical Buddhism against the backdrop of the ongoing Rohingya crisis in Myanmar and the episodic violence involving Buddhist extremist groups and Muslim minority communities in Sri Lanka. In this respect, three factors are important to consider: a majority minority construct that underpins religio ethnic relations, the state and clergy nexus, and the inadequacy of state responses and counter narratives. So, see this the second point, the state and clergy nexus. This is what always happens when actually religio-fascist states come into power, and this is pretty much the opposite of what's happening in India. In India, they are not even listening to the basic demands of the clergy, like freeing the temples. The inadequacy of state responses and counter narratives. काउंटर नैरेटिव बनाने वाला कोई था नहीं, जिसने काउंटर नैरेटिव बनाना चाहा वो उसको मार दिया, और हम तो काउंटर नैरेटिव में ही रह रहे हैं. Radical Buddhist groups such as the Bodu Bolu Sena in Sri Lanka and Mabatha in Myanmar justify intolerance, discrimination, and violence against minority Muslim populations by using Theravada Buddhism, which is widely practiced in South and Southeast Asia. If left unchecked, political violence will proliferate in Sri Lanka and Myanmar and could further spill over into nearby regions. So you see, there's a strain going around of this Southeast Asian violent Buddhists, and they, I think, are in conversation and in direct contact with Indian Buddhists, and this is an international Buddhist nexus going on. We need to be careful about them as much as anyone. As such, alternate narratives that support peace and religious pluralism need to be promoted. There is also a need for economic, political, and social reforms to achieve long-term peace and stability. Yeah, there's the classic Marxist argument that the economic, political, and social reform. Social reform नहीं है, इसलिए श्रीलंका का हालत ये हो गया. Introduction. Across Asia, the rise of hardline religious movements in fueling an insular nationalism and exacerbating fault lines in the inter-ethnic and inter-religious relations. This article examines violent incidents in Sri Lanka and Myanmar perpetrated by hardline Buddhist groups against Muslim minority communities, which indicate that a militant ultranationalist strand within a segment of Theravada Buddhism is on the rise, and this has to be on the rise in India as well. Sri Lanka and Myanmar have Buddhist majorities, about 75% and 90% of the population respectively, and both have sizable Muslim minorities. Despite such demographic majorities, the notion that Buddhism is under siege and in danger of being wiped out resonates with the Sinhalese and Bamar Buddhist majorities in both countries. Religious justification for the above-mentioned rhetoric is derived from distorted interpretations of Theravada Buddhism scriptures, which elevate the preservation and defense of Buddhism above other traditional Buddhist values such as peace and compassion. The defense of one's religion has also evolved from key themes related to cultural, national, and ethnic identity. Hardline Buddhist organizations such as Mabatha in Myanmar and BBS in Sri Lanka have exploited such narratives to advocate the protection and promotion of Buddhism and the state against the perceived threats from within and outside the country. श्रीलंका में कौन किसको थ्रेट कर रहा था? खुद के दिमाग से ही ऐसे थ्रेट बना लिया, as if Tamils were going there to set up Hindu Rashtra in Sri Lanka. Their rhetoric has partly been fragmented against Islamist movements involved in global terrorism and extremism that are seen as inherently violent and driven by an agenda to take over the country, wider region, and eventually the rest of the world. The December 2018 political crisis in Sri Lanka involving the country's president and prime minister, as well as escalating violence between Buddhist secessionist militias and Myanmar's military in Rakhine state, have prompted fresh fears of extremists stoking religious and ethnic tensions that could trigger violence. Myanmar also wiped out its Tamil Hindu minorities. Yeah, I had heard about that. And let's check out another paper. ये देखो, ये एक और पेपर है, इसमें The rhetoric of violence in Buddhist tantras. We will have to check this out as well. Terror in Burma, Buddhists versus Muslims. What say? We'll get to all of these. Let's see what this says. Santa Clara University. Let's check this out. Abstract पढ़ लेते हैं पहले. This article explores the rhetoric of violence in the Buddhist tantras, arguing that it generally falls into two types. Violence deployed in a purely rhetorical fashion for the purpose of impressing or persuading the reader, and textual depictions of violence, violent ritual practices, which can, with some caveats, be interpreted as depictions of and possibly prescriptions for ritual violence. The former type often includes grandiose or exaggerated instances of hyperbolic rhetoric, often deployed for the purpose of aggrandizing the text or tradition. The article segues to discussions of descriptions and prescriptions for ritual violence and explores one of the justifications given for ritual violence, namely that it contributes to or is excused by the attainment of a spiritually advanced state of awareness called the non-dual gnosis, Advaya Jnana. Here, particular attention is paid to violent rituals that involve the creation of effigies or symbolic substitutes for a sacrificial victim. These rituals, rather than involving actual violence, instead symbolically depict it. Yet, these rituals are still violent insofar as they are symbolic enactments of acts of violence. तो ये violence खेलते हैं, शत्रुबोध भी खेलते हैं तंत्र में, और जब किसी को ऐसा ही पसंद नहीं है, मारना होता है, तब अलग टेक्स्ट को मिसइंटरप्रेट करके मार डालते हैं लोगों को. Yet these rituals are still violent insofar as they are symbolic enactments of acts of violence, and often they are performed with the goal of actually harming the victim, who is symbolically represented in the ritual practice. The article concludes with an examination of strategy for legitimizing such violence by invoking the concept of non-dual gnosis, and suggests that this ethical double standard has actually been used to ethically dubious conduct by contemporary Buddhist leaders. Bhutan persecuted its Nepali Hindu minorities. Yes. Yeah, I forgot about that. Okay, let's see another paper. The rhetoric of violence, and then terror in Burma, Buddhists versus Muslims. JSTOR is so slow. I think JSTOR is so slow, that's why the Indian philosophy, when I discussed that book from the Indian Ministry of Culture website, all my website crashes. For a devoutly Buddhist country, Burma has lots of people who hedge their bets. Animism is still a force in the country, especially in the villages, and animist beliefs have been incorporated into Burma's brand of Theravada Buddhism for centuries. 37 great nuts or spirits are recognized as guardians of Buddhist temples. Fortune telling and astrology are widely practiced, and many Burmese employ astrological charts in naming their children. Numerology has also long figured into decision making in the country, sometimes in ways that to outsiders seem downright bizarre. On the advice of astrologers, for instance, the country became formally independent from Great Britain at exactly 4:20 a.m. on January 4, 1948. The Brits had pushed for January 1st. They delayed their independence by 3 days. The military leaders who ruled the country from 1962 until 2011, Nevin and Thanshui in particular, often seemed obsessed with lucky numbers. Nevin's lucky number was 9, the principal reason that he introduced currency in Lupi 45 kyat and 90 kyat units in 1987. The number 11 was Thanshui's favorite. Hence, the origin of the 65-year prison sentences handed out in 2008 to 14 prominent pro-democracy activists. 6 plus 5 makes 11. Get it? Okay. Pro-democracy advocates को जेल में डाल दिया, इतना peaceful religion है. This is what they want to do in India, essentially. This is exactly how they speak, okay, online. And there is also the so-called 88888 uprising that got its name because it was time to begin on August 8, 1988, a date seen as propitious in Burma and other parts of Asia. Not to be upstaged, General Saw Muang, Nevin's cat's paw, crushed the uprising on September 18th. September is the ninth month, and 1 plus 8 equals 9. In a disingenuous concession to the activists, they pretended to be giving in to the activism, but they weren't actually planning to do so. The government later scheduled a general election, the first since 1962, for Sunday, May 27, 1990. Why? In the Gregorian calendar, which is used formally in Burma, it was the fourth Sunday of the fifth month. There's that 9 again. So numbers matter in Burma, and unfortunately two numbers that matter a lot in Burma today are 969 and 786. Much has been written this year about the 969 movement, led by Buddhist nationalists, that according to many observers is fomenting, or at the very least supporting, a broad range of anti-Muslim activities, including violent ones, across much of Burma. Although the Burmese monk Ashin Wirathu, the guy in our thumbnail, Burmese monk Ashin Wirathu, known as just Wirathu, has become the face of Buddhist terror. The writings in the 1990s of another Burmese monk, Koel were instrumental in creating the ideological basis for today's 969 movement. If Wirathu is the Burmese Bin Laden, as the monk has referred to himself, Kyaw Lwin is the 969 movement's equivalent to Sayyid Qutb, the intellectual godfather of jihadism. Okay, this is why. Okay, Afin is saying, lol, you want to do this? Then from Vietnam, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Kashmir, Sindh, Indonesia, etc. They also force converted us or kicked them away. I literally want a solution for us, the Hindu people. Is like, we keep dying, but randomly we still keep alive. We must continue to fight for our religio culture. Afin, who were you talking about? Buddhists? Did Buddhists kick out Hindus from Vietnam, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Kashmir, Sindh, and Indonesia? I did not know that. If that is true, let me know in the comments. That will be hilarious. And also, the question needs to be asked, why isn't this common knowledge among all the new things that we are finding out, which are now becoming common knowledge? This also needs to be common knowledge. So check this out. This guy, Ashin Wirathu, the guy on the thumbnail, addresses himself as the Burmese Bin Laden. Doing the numbers is crucial for understanding Burmese politics. In fact, 786 became significant before 969. The number 786 is derived from the numerical value in the Arabic abjad numeral system of the opening passage of the Quran. In the abjad system, all 28 letters in the Arabic alphabet are assigned numeric values. The Quran opens with the word "in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful." The numerical value of these words in the abjad system comes to 786. In parts of the Muslim world, especially in South Asia and Burma, the number 786 has come to be posted on shops, stores, buildings, etc. as a kind of signaling mechanism to denote this place is Muslim. But in the increasingly tense ethnocultural atmosphere in numerologically fixated Burma of recent decades, the number 786 has been interpreted by some Buddhists as possessing a coded meaning over and above this simple ethnic identification. Because 7 plus 8 plus 6 equals 21. Muslims, in posting the number publicly, are said by some Buddhists to be pronouncing that they will dominate the world in the 21st century. Okay, that's why they are going around putting 21 in their shops, because they want to dominate the 21st century. Okay, this is the level of their intelligence and brain, and this is why they have never read anything written by Ambedkar after 1935. And this, with these brains, they want to destroy Hinduism in India. This is why they go around saying Buddha came 6,000 years back and Rig Veda was written 2,000 years back, and after that all the bad things started happening in India. Buddhist ideologues in Burma came up with 969 as a political counterpunch to 786. These numbers are said to capture in symbolic form the key virtues of Buddhism. The Lord Buddha has 9 special attributes. There are said to be 6 special attributes to Buddhist teachings, and Buddhist monks to possess special attributes. 9 in fact. Thus, 969, a number that also happens to be much larger than the Muslim 786. Lol. Okay, let's check out Afin's comments. Yup, one of the reasons Cholas attacked Bengal and Indonesia was because Buddhists were attacking Hindu Shaivites. Oh damn. Heck, Draupadi Murmu's tribe or caste literally came from Cambodia after they kicked out. I see. Nice. Okay, I know why Cholas attacked Indonesia. The Srivijaya Empire was doing all sorts of business nonsense in the Malacca Strait region, and also poking the Mataram Empire for basically no reason. And Cholas sent repeated warnings that don't do this, don't screw up the business between China, India, and Egypt. They kept on doing it, and the Srivijaya Empire had a deal with China that someday a war might break out. So you please help us if we have a war with Cholas, etc. So they did a deal with China, but on the other hand, they kept sending gifts to the Chola Empire to build Hindu temples, and I think even Buddhist monasteries, I guess. So Cholas were not entirely aware of their plans. तो अभी चाइना के साथ दोस्ती हो जाने से सबको लगता है कि अच्छा हमारा तो बड़े विंग्स आ गए हैं, अभी हम उड़ेंगे, सबको मार देंगे. तो आज जो पाकिस्तान और श्रीलंका के साथ हो रहा है, दैट एग्जैक्ट सेम थिंग हैपेंड विद श्रीविजय एम्पायर. तो then about 150-200 years went by. They gradually basically they were behaving like traffic police in the Malacca Strait. कि यहाँ से जा रहे हो तो हमें और भी कट मनी दो, और भी कट मनी दो. ये कट मनी बढ़ते जा रहा है. बिजनेस इज गेटिंग हैम्पर्ड एंड चोलाज विल नॉट टॉलरेट बिजनेस गेटिंग हैम्पर्ड. कि तुम जितना हिंदू हो, बुद्धिस्ट हो, सब बाद में, पहले अर्थ था, उसके बाद धर्मा. तो आफ्टर मेनी वार्निंग्स and the Srivijaya Empire led a war on Mataram Empire as well, which was Hindu. Then Cholas sent a gigantic fleet and absolutely destroyed them. And what China did was hilarious, and what China is doing today as well, that they did not send any help. Okay, so the deal that they had in place was crude, because mysteriously in between, Cholas also had sent an emissary to China. So we don't exactly know what did Cholas and the Chinese discuss, but they did have a discussion, and maybe this was the discussion that yes, see, this is the problem, even तुम्हारा बिजनेस भी फंसा हुआ है, इजिप्ट का बिजनेस फंसा हुआ है, हमारा बिजनेस फंसा हुआ है, पूरा इंडिया का बिजनेस वहाँ मालाक्का स्ट्रेट से आ रहा है, जा रहा है, और ये लोग चुतिया पकड़ रहे हैं वहाँ पे. तो we will need to handle them someday. So when we handle them, don't come and fuck with us. So that's what happened. Years later, Cholas did brought fire and rain on the Srivijaya Empire, and the Chinese did not come to help them. Okay. Afin is saying, remember Angkor Wat? Yeah, Hindu Vaishnav temple converted into Buddhist temple. Yeah, that's almost never talked about. How did it mysteriously become Buddhist? I would like to read about it. Is there any source? Same in Afghanistan and Kashmir with Shaivites, and Sindh with Vaishnav. Heck, they even allied with Muslims. Yes, they are doing so right now as well. They also allied with Greeks, leading to Pushpamitra Shunga doing what he did. Okay. Shunga brought Babar, right? Heck, Vajrasana Buddhism is literally stolen Vajrakula of Shakta Hinduism. It is similar to what Islam is to Jews earlier. Oh, I see. Okay, so let's check out the stupidity with numbers in this paper first. These are all very small papers. We'll do all three today. Okay, Afin is bringing us some fantastic data. I had absolutely no idea about these. तो देखो, we are surrounded by enemies. Okay, एक enemy पे फोकस करके नहीं होगा. एक enemy को यहाँ से आप फोकस करेंगे, सब पूरा 100 लोग जाके यहाँ पे काउंटर करेंगे, पीछे से और कोई आ जाएगा. तो चारों तरफ हमको इंटेलेक्चुअल बंदूक लेके खड़ा होना है. असली बंदूक तो और लोगों के पास है ही. Reading political developments in Burma is never easy. But getting a handle on the 969 movement, which is specifically by this Wirathu guy in my thumbnail, the 969 movement is especially tricky. Its origins can be traced back to the early 1990s. In response to the 8888, I'm going to have to say 8888 so many times. How to Quadra 8, okay? Quadra 8 uprising and the pro-democracy agitation in the years thereafter, the generals in charge of the country, hoping at once to split apart and co-opt some part of the community of Buddhist monks involved in anti-government activism, began promoting what was touted as a Buddhist renewal movement. The movement's ideology combined Buddhist religious fanaticism with intense Burmese nationalism and more than a tinge of ethnic chauvinism. Not surprisingly, it became strongest, perhaps I should say most virulent, among the Pamar, the principal ethnic group in Burma, accounting for about 2/3 of the country's population and especially prominent in the lowlands of the Irrawaddy Basin. The vast majority of the Bamar are Theravada Buddhists. And I used to be a motorcycle traveler. I have been to many places on my bike. I haven't been to Ladakh and stuff because I didn't get the time. I started riding a bike in 2015 only. So I've toured entire Bengal, Orissa, Jharkhand, Sikkim. So I was part of 2 riding groups. So in the main riding group that I was in, those people are all obviously more experienced in motorcycle traveling than me. They have toured the entire country. They have been outside as well to Bangladesh, etc. So they used to say that Myanmar is the only place they will never go on a bike because it's filled with dacoits, and they are very racially. You will be screwed as well. Like, कहाँ से आए हो? ऐसे क्यों दिखते हो? Bike में काहे आया? Those sorts of things, and you'll probably be looted and murdered. So it's a very unstable country with absolutely crazy people and Buddhist religious fanatics. Okay. Ex-Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, and other 2 Indic religions. Heck, okay, plenty. I usually read a lot on archives, not a single author, but a mixture. You'll get why I said we Hindus are alone in this world. Yeah. No, Pushpamitra Sunga attacked a lot of. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Sunga is accused of being the anti-Buddhist Hindu king. Now I remember. A lot of Buddhist monastery, they were providing shelter to Greeks if they converted. Okay, and destroyed the remaining powers of Mauryan Empire. This isn't BC. Yeah, I remember now. Thank you. Okay, so the main message of this 969 movement was and is Burma for Buddhists, particularly for Buddhists who are Bamar rather than members of other ethnic groups. See, why leftists will probably conflate these things with the Hindutva movement, but see why this is not. Okay, this sentence absolutely aptly describes their movement and is absolutely opposite of what Hindus are saying. I have this funny argument now that as you all know that my girlfriend is a Marxist. So I was making her listen to that song Tel laga lo dabar ka naam mita do, Tel laga lo dabar ka naam mita do babar ka. Even in that song which is hilariously the most far right song ever created in India. It's the war cry of the evil Hindu fascists. Even that song has a goddamn sentence that says Babar did all the bad stuff and Islam got blamed. See, that's how far right Hindu fascist we are. We are not equating a bad person with the religion. The most farthest right wing of us are writing a song that says that becomes a war cry of the right wing movement, says that Islam got blamed because of Babar's actions. And look at what Buddhists are doing here. So, Burma for Buddhists. Are we saying India only for Hindus? We will kick out everyone, we'll kill everyone. Shortly after the movement began, a monk named Kyo Lwin became a central figure, and his writings were distilled and distributed by a unit of the official religious ministry, first as How to Live as a Good Buddhist, and later as The Best Buddhist. After Kyo Lwin's death in 2001, at the age of 70, Wirathu, who had known Kyo Lwin for a number of years, along with a number of other monks, picked up the mantle and began elaborating upon the dead monk's thoughts, albeit with a more explicitly and aggressively anti-Muslim message. Yes, Sekumaku. The movement gained momentum in Burma in 2001, helping to precipitate an upsurge of anti-Muslim activity. The destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan by the Islamist Taliban in March played an incendiary role. So they became genocidal maniacs क्योंकि वहाँ पे बुद्धा का मूर्ति तोड़ दिया अफगानिस्तान में. और and look at Hindus. We are too peaceful for our own safety, and they are violent for almost no reason. The destruction, okay. Such activity included anti-Muslim riots, most notably in Sitwe, capital of Rakhine State, in February 2001, and in Taungoo, in the Bago region of south-central Burma, about 220 kilometers northeast of what was then the Burmese capital Yangon, in May 2001. In the latter, more than 200 Muslims were killed and 11 mosques destroyed. क्या इंडिया के हिंदुओं को बोलते फिरते पूरे देश के दुनिया के लोग बुद्धिज्म हाँ पीसफुल, ये देखो क्या हो रहा है पीसफुल में. 200 Muslims were killed and 11 mosques were destroyed. What? How can someone equate these things with Hindutva movement? All of this happened even before September 11 exacerbated anti-Muslim sentiment in Burma and elsewhere. ये 9/11 से पहले कर दिया है. Okay, this is the problem with preemptively trying to stop someone from doing violence. तो वहाँ पे तालिबान ने बुद्धा का मूर्ति तोड़ा, यहाँ पे अपने देश के मुस्लिम को मार दिया. Violence against Muslims continued intermittently after Sitwe and Taungoo. I myself witnessed several such incidents while visiting the ancient temple complex at Morocco in Rakhine State. And Wirathu, that leader who had been fanning the flames, was arrested in 2003 for inciting anti-Muslim riots in his hometown near Mandalay, riots in which Buddhists killed 10 Muslims. Wirathu was sentenced to 25 years in prison but was released as part of a broader amnesty in 2011. Shortly before the latest surge of anti-Muslim activity in the country, which spiked in the period from fall 2012 to summer 2013. During this spike, Kyaw Lewin's ideas, mediated by Wirathu, became increasingly salient, and the 969 appeared menacingly all over the country. Okay. Afin is saying, by the way, I'll burst a lot of bubbles here. Sikhs also have started this way. They are literally sitting on Twitter and Clubhouse these days with jihadis and using the same language as polemics. Yeah. But are they Khalistani Sikhs or non-Khalistani Sikhs who are like patriotic Indians? I don't know much about them. Is there a definition, or most Sikhs are becoming that way? Violence against Muslims, okay, this part we read. Since November 2012, more than 250 people have been killed and many more injured, the vast majority of them Muslims, as a result of a series of acts of what some have labeled Buddhist terror, mostly in the West and in central Burma. In addition, somewhere between about 140,000 and 250,000 Muslims, estimates vary dramatically, have been displaced, mostly from their homes in Rakhine State, formerly Arakan State, the western part of which abuts Bangladesh. The 969 movement is deeply involved, but it is a politically and culturally complex situation. It seems pretty clear that what is going on in most of Burma right now is more akin to terrorism than to sectarian conflict, as some have preferred to style it. ये sectarian conflict कैसे हो गया? Even in Rakhine State, where there is a large Muslim minority and the violence is somewhat less one-sided, the power of the Buddhist majority supported, when necessary, by the Buddhist Bamar-controlled government is iron-handed. To be sure, Muslims have often been accused of instigating specific incidents across Burma. There have been an uncanny number of rumors of Muslim men attempting to rape Buddhist women, for example, but the weight of the evidence suggests that such rumors are more often than not fictions, useful primarily for provocation or to rationalize Buddhist promoting or at least supporting violence. And this is why we can't afford to become religious extremists like these nutjob Buddhists, because violence first of all means that business cannot take place. अर्थ के बिना धर्म नहीं होता है. ये बोल बोल के चाणक्य ने मुंह से फूक निकाल दिया. एंड दिस इज व्हाट दीज पीपल डोंट गेट, क्योंकि इनको तो नॉन वायलेंस करना था, अब वो काम नहीं आ रहा है, अब ये सब चुतियापा कर रहे हैं. बट वी कांट अफोर्ड टू स्क्रू आवर मार्केट, आर स्टेबल इकोनॉमी by doing this kind of crap. If anything, unfortunately, Khalistanis have a loud voice and are influencing ordinary ones. Yeah, they are the loud minority among Sikhs, that it seems like. Ordinary ones are also that thinks entire unpartitioned India is their sacred geography. सबका भी unpartitioned India चाहिए, मगर सबको लगता है ये उनका sacred geography है, और सबको लगता है कि ब्राह्मण आके ये सब चेंज कर दिए. उसके पहले भी ये पूरा का पूरा सिख राष्ट्र था, या पूरा का पूरा बुद्धा था. Oh, let me tell you what's going on in Bangladesh. There are now people saying, उनको तो आज तक तो ये उनका कॉन्शियस डिसीजन था कि बांग्ला को अरबी बनाएंगे ग्रेजुअली, पानी वानी घुसाएंगे. जैसे कि रेनबो को हम बंगाली में रामधनु बोलते हैं, उन्होंने राम का नाम नहीं लेना है, इसलिए रॉन्गधनु बना दिया. तो ऐसे बहुत से हिदायत, जायज़, ये सब कुछ वर्ड यूज़ करते हैं बंगाली में. Now they are saying that these were originally Bengali words spoken here in Bengal. Then Brahmin Pandits came and tried to forcefully teach them Sanskrit. And that's when their pure Arabic Bengali, originally which was existing in Bangladesh for some goddamn reason, became Sanskritized at one point. And then they had to, under oppression, they had to learn Sanskrit and speak in a Sanskritized Bengali, which they are now pushing back against. So all this while, this has been the argument that everyone was, India was essentially a barren land. All ideas, all food, all architecture, everything came to India. Hindu Brahmins also came to India, Aryans came to India. Now they are saying they came so late that everyone was here already. Sikh भी यहाँ थे पहले से, खालिस्तानी यहाँ थे, बांग्लादेशी भी यहाँ थे जो कि अरबी बोल रहे थे, बंगाल में बैठ के वंगा में बैठ के अरबी भाषा बोल रहे थे. बुद्धिस्ट भी यहाँ थे, सिर्फ आर्यंस आए ये परसों. ये हर बात में ब्राह्मण्स को ही क्यों ब्लेम करते हैं? तो ब्राह्मण्स को ब्लेम नहीं करेगा तो प्रॉपरली कोर में कैसे हिट करेगा? नॉलेज प्रोडक्शन को तो बंद करना है ना. ब्राह्मण्स वर आर नॉलेज प्रोड्यूसर्स, विजडम प्रोड्यूसर्स, जिसका एंशियंट टेक्स्ट मैं आज 2023 में पढ़ रहा हूँ. तो क्योंकि क्षत्रिय से कुछ पंगा लेना होगा तो रास्ते पे उतरना पड़ेगा. रास्ते पे तो सब नहीं उतरेंगे. मुगल्स गेव अस बिरयानी, यस. तो okay, let's continue with the paper. To those with only a casual interest in Asian affairs, the notion of Buddhist terrorism seems something of an oxymoron. Yes, because why? Buddhists are peaceful, nice ambient music listening people. For example, in Time magazine's such discussed story on the country, The Face of Buddhist Terror, that was the famous Time magazine cover, there is a pull-out quote on the first page that reads, "It's a faith famous for its pacifism and tolerance." ये famous for pacifism and tolerance कैसे हुआ? हाँ, किसके साथ पैसिफिज्म और टॉलरेंस किया है? सिर्फ मेन स्ट्रीम में ऐसे बातें बोलते फिर है, जैसे कि अशरफ मुस्लिम मेन स्ट्रीम में सिर्फ बिरयानी और सूफी शायरी और पोइट्री, म्यूजिक, ये सब डिस्कस करते हैं. ये भी मेन स्ट्रीम में ये डिस्कस करते हैं, मगर काम में क्या करते हैं? तो पैसिफिज्म और टॉलरेंस में चाइना के साथ क्या किया? चाइना को भी तो टॉलरेट कर लिया. वहां पे कहाँ गया था इनका बुद्धिस्ट नेशनलिज्म? But in several of Asia's Buddhist majority nations, monks are inciting bigotry and violence, mostly against Muslims. Later in the piece, another line reads, "To much of the world, Buddhism, is synonymous with non-violence and loving kindness, concepts propagated by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, 2,500 years ago." Who was criticizing Brahmins? Gautama Buddha was. We read the texts last week in the video called Casteism in Buddhism, that Buddha was criticizing Brahmins, saying कुत्ते तुमसे अच्छा blood lineage समझते हैं, तुम ये और कास्ट के लोगों के साथ क्यों शादी कर रहे हो? Okay, you don't understand how to protect your varna. Dogs understand this better. They don't go around having sex with random other animals. They only have sex with other dogs. Okay. No, we Brahmins came from Ukraine. Now our homeland is under attack. We should boycott Russian oil and use bicycle only. Brahmins came from Andromeda. Yes. Abraham is actually a Brahmin. I'm gonna run this propaganda. Let me see how far I can sigh off. this. You should also try this. Like a Brahmin left India and came to Israel and changed their religion. Yes, Brahmins came from Atlantis, Dalits came from Wakanda. Yeah. Why Koenraad supports Buddhists in Myanmar issue? There may be some reason to support them, but support them in what sense? That they have a legitimate issue for grievance, the Myanmar Buddhists, or do they have a justification to create all this violence, kill all these Muslims, kick out all these Muslims from their country? I don't think that's ever justified, unless there is a riot going on or civil war going on. That's not what's going on. Rohingyas are not doing such things in Burma. Tamils were not doing that thing in Sri Lanka. So, although you are specifically talking about Myanmar, so anyway, it is a preemptive first strike. Rohingyas did not do the violence on them first. They started it all on their own on this numerology bullshit. Sectarian chauvinism. Okay. Siddhartha Gautama 2500 years ago. This sentence is qualified immediately by another. But like adherents of any other religion, Buddhists and their holy men are not immune to politics and on occasion the lure of sectarian chauvinism. A brief glimpse back at Burma's history shows how true and truly complex this idea is. During the British colonial period, by which we generally mean Buddhist Bamar, periodically denounced and rose up against the relatively small communities of indigenous Muslims and especially against Muslim immigrants from South Asia, whose arrival was encouraged by the British rulers. Yes, Rohingyas, Bengali Muslim Chittagonians who were brought in by the British. Some of the actions ostensibly directed against Muslim immigrants, against Muslim migrants were actually animated by anger towards the British for indecising the country, purportedly to the economic detriment of the Bamar among the native-born ethnic groups. म्यांमार का डेमोक्रेसी नहीं आ रहा है, इकोनॉमी नहीं ठीक हो रहा है, और ये सब कर रहा है. We have our artha in place. The South Asians who migrated to Burma in the 19th century and early 20th century mainly came from Madras, Bengal and Ceylon. Okay, who are these migrants now? इनको भी निकल दिया. Yes, Afin was also saying, I think I had heard of this as well previously, that a lot of Hindus were kicked out from Myanmar. I think I did it in Thomas Sowell's book. Thomas Sowell speaks of how in many countries, except in India, I think except India, USA, some countries, in a lot of third world countries, what ends up happening is that the majority population just imagines in their mind that the minority is oppressing them, okay? Because the minority is usually better at their jobs. They get all the best qualifications, education, jobs, everything, and then the majority community of the ongoing failure of the country, the majority community ends up thinking that all this failure is happening because the minority community is creating all the wealth. Minority community के बदले हम अगर wealth create करते तब हमारा देश बहुत अच्छा हो जाता. That's what people usually think in the third world countries. So then they start their genocides and all sorts of weird oppression. Here the majority community is oppressed like the minority community, and even then the majority community is doing better than the minority community in India. So the day we get Hindu special laws and educational policies in place which positively discriminates in favor of Hindus, that's the day Hindu quality of work, education, any work skills, that will start deteriorating then, okay? Right now, no one can, all the communities are largely way far behind Hindus because they have so many special laws trying to help them. Welfare policies always have counterproductive results, okay? Wakanda forever. So, Aniket, yeah, Koenraad maybe supports for this reason. Okay. So the South Asians who migrated to Burma in the 19th century and early 20th century came mainly from Madras, Bengal and Ceylon, Sri Lanka. Over half of them were Muslim and they took up residence mainly in cities and labor-scarce areas in lower Burma. Over time, they came to play important roles in the country as seasonal labor in agriculture, in transportation and construction, as workers in rice mills, as stevedores, dock workers, as merchants, moneylenders, as well as in the British civil service and the British military. There was a lot of turnover, with most South Asian migrants arriving by sea for short term, often seasonal stints, then returning back to their homeland. Many immigrants also arrived in western Burma from Chittagong and other parts of Bengal via overland routes. While some of these migrants later quit Burma as well, a substantial number remained in Arakan, now Rakhine state, which has remained a flashpoint in ethnic religious conflict even today. There were instances of the overwhelmingly Buddhist Bamar lashing out against South Asian migrant communities, sometimes violently, as in 1926, 1930, 1938. तो ये देखो, आज रोहिंगा के साथ जो कर रहा है उसके लिए कोनराड सोच सकते हैं कि हाँ कुछ जस्टिफिकेशन होगा, मुस्लिम ये सब करते हैं दूसरे जगह में, तो वहाँ पे भी कुछ गलत सीधा कर दिया होगा, इसलिए बुद्धिस्ट गॉट पिस्ड ऑफ. बट व्हाट द फक वाज देयर जस्टिफिकेशन इन 1926, 1930, 1938? तब क्या जस्टिफिकेशन था? तब भी मुस्लिम उनको अप्रेस कर रहे थे उनके देश में जाके. ये जो पुसी एक्सक्यूजेस है, ये एक्सक्यूज जो एक बार देना शुरू करते हैं वो कभी नहीं बंद होता है. देखो पैलेस्टाइन को देखो, पाकिस्तान को देखो, पूरा जिंदगी कंप्लेन करके ही चला गया, जबकि उनका देश का एग्जिस्टेंस ही बना है किसी और को मारने के लिए, और कंप्लेन वो खुद करते जाते हैं. But it was not clear whether these outbreaks had to do mainly with economic resentments or were manifestations of political opposition to the British colonizers and their South Asian confederates, or what role race and color played. The Bamar are of East Asian origin. Their language is considered Sino-Tibetan, and they are generally lighter skinned than South Asians in Burma, who are sometimes referred to pejoratively in the Burmese language as Kala, a term that can be loosely translated as dark-skinned foreigner. The South Asian and Muslim presence and the quote-unquote problem it represented in Burma receded considerably as a result of the Great Depression, World War II, and the end of colonial rule. With the Burmese economy tanking, fewer South Asians migrated and many of those already in the country left for home. Wartime disruptions and dislocations lessened Burma's appeal even more, and when the British, their nominal protectors, were ousted in 1948, South Asians' interest in Burma further waned. There were of course still South Asians, many of them Muslims, in Burma after independence, although such communities included groups that had participated in the anti-colonial coalition. With independence, the country became more and more dominated by the Buddhist Bamar majority. Anti-South Asian and anti-Muslim activities accelerated sharply in Burma after Nevip's coup in 1962, which led many of the remaining South Asians to leave the country and reduce the status, rights, and privileges of the Muslims who remained South Asian or otherwise. So you see, it's not just a Muslim, they don't just have a problem with these people just because they are Muslims, okay? They also have a problem with them because of their race. This is pure racism. It's not just religio-fascism. So what does the Muslim community, or more accurately, the various Muslim communities in Burma look like today? It is not easy to answer this question because of the information gap caused by Burma's stubborn isolation. The last official government census was taken in 1983, and that one was incomplete because no population counts were taken in the parts of the country in states of insurgency at the time. The best estimates place the Muslim minority today at somewhere between 4 and 8% of the total population. 4 और 8% का मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन है. इससे डर से इतना दिमाग खराब हो गया है कि देश से निकाल दिया सबको. They are both communal and racist, yes. It is not easy to answer this question because of the information gap caused by Burma's stubborn isolation. The best estimates place the Muslim minority today at somewhere between 4 and 8% of the total population in a country of roughly 55 to 60 million. The Muslim population is widely dispersed. For example, so-called Panthes, who are Chinese Muslims, are located in various parts of northern Burma, including Mandalay. Numerous Muslims of Malay ancestry, that is from Malaysia, they live in the far southeast of the country, and thousands of Indian Muslims still dwell in Rangoon, particularly downtown in the area to the west of the Sewell Pagoda. The largest concentration of Muslims, however, resides in western Burma in Rakhine state, much in the news of late because of reports of intermittent acts of Buddhist terror against Muslims in the region. Muslims constitute a large minority of the population, perhaps as much as a quarter, in this state of roughly 4 million. Muslims have lived in Rakhine since the 8th or 9th century. Most of the early Muslim migrants arrived in the region by sea as part of one or another circuit in the voluminous Bay of Bengal trade. However, Rakhine was lightly populated in comparison to neighboring Bengal, and some Bengalis had always migrated eastward over land. After Bengal became Islamicized in the early 13th century, migration eastward continued. Over time, Bengali Muslims came to constitute a sizable minority of Rakhine's population, especially in the far west. Rakhine was conquered and annexed by Burma in 1784, after which time some Burmese Muslims also settled down in the area. The British acquired Rakhine as a result of the First Anglo-Burmese War, and once in control, they encouraged South Asian migration into the region, most of which consisted of Bengali Muslims from the area around Chittagong. These are Rohingyas. Over time, Muslims from Bengal overwhelmed in numbers other Muslim communities in Rakhine. As a result, some scholars and journalists refer to all Muslims in Rakhine as Rohingya, from Rohang, which in the Rohingya language is the word for Rakhine. Okay. Others believe that the Rohingya constitute but one discrete part of Burma's Muslim population. Chittagongian Bengalis. The Muslim subgroup. This paper is from 2013. The Muslim subgroup, the far west of Rakhine, is allegedly comprised largely of people who have migrated relatively recently and illegally into Burma. In some ways, this is all definitional parsing. Whatever the case, it is clear that large elements of the Bamar population support a spectrum of actions against Muslims in Rakhine, ranging from discrimination to persecution to paramilitary or military assaults to expulsion. Indeed, actors ranging from 969 to the military to the government, and at times even to democracy advocate and Nobel Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi, have proven willing to countenance, if not explicitly to endorse, varying levels of anti-Rohingya activity in Rakhine, with some willing to apply the same repression to Muslims in Burma more generally. On the other hand, human rights groups, NGOs and international organizations, including Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders and the UN, view the Rohingya not as stateless people but as rightful members of Burmese society who have been subjected for decades, if not centuries, to illegal and immoral actions stretching all the way to attempts at ethnic cleansing by elements of the Buddhist Bamar majority. तो ये लोगों का तो ये काम ही है. अगर रोहिंगा कुछ खराब करते तब भी ये ह्यूमन राइट्स वॉच वाले यही बोलते, तो इनको सीरियसली लेने का ज़रूरत नहीं है. Although I think it is possible to distinguish, even in Rakhine, between Rohingya specifically and Muslims generally, both groups and other minorities in Burma have legitimate grievances regarding their treatment at the hands of the Bamar-controlled state. This is not to suggest that Muslims have been blameless in cases where anti-Muslim violence has occurred, but by and large, extremist elements in the Bamar community, taking advantage of the political opening that began in 2011, have found reasons to settle old scores, emphatically reassert ethno-cultural solidarity and dominance in the country, and maybe even redraw the economic, demographic, and political maps. To much of the world, news emanating from far-off Burma about Buddhist terrorism seems puzzling because it cuts so deeply against the stereotype of a peaceful, tolerant, and serene religion. In fact, Burma isn't the only Buddhist majority country where extremist Buddhist elements are engaging in violence against other groups for political ends. Sri Lanka and Thailand are two others. If you read Thomas Sowell, you'll get to read a lot of examples of violence against Thailand's minorities by Buddhists. Moreover, historically, also Hinduism just remains in Bali. The rest of the region is mostly Buddhist and Muslim. How? Moreover, historically, there have been numerous terrorist groups with Buddhist backgrounds in Burma, as well as in other Buddhist countries and regions such as Bhutan, Nepal, Japan, Tibet. So you see, India's Buddhists want to be terrorists in their mind. अभी उतना पैसा नहीं है, उतना लोग नहीं मिल रहा है इसलिए. They are just, they just don't have the resources. They want to be a nuisance. Burma has witnessed many dramatic developments in recent years, most of them positive, but some troubling and even dangerous. Buddhist terrorism must be seen in this hazy light. Flurries of anti-Muslim activity, including terrorism, have occurred periodically during Burmese history, but Buddhists and Muslims have also lived together in the country in peace for long stretches. I see. The Bamar are not and have never been universally anti-Muslim, much less universally involved in or even supportive of terrorism. Indeed, contacts in Yangon have recently told me of many Buddhists willing to harbor, in some cases even to stand with and protect Muslim friends in the city when dangers arise. Buddhist terrorism is clearly useful to elements in Burma, including politicals of various tribes. Just like Khalistani terrorism is beneficial to Congress, that's why they created Khalistan. So you see, the nexus, all these people are same. They are behaving in the same way. They are forming coalitions in the same way. They are doing violence for the same reasons. Buddhist terrorism is clearly useful to elements in Burma. Just like Islamic terrorism is useful to elements in India. Khalistani terrorism is useful to people, some politicals in India, including politicals of various stripes who hope to unify the Bamar politically on an ethno-cultural basis as the country democratizes. It is hard to know how far they will go, in large part because we don't know how far they are currently going. One thing we can say for sure though, the answer to the question of Buddhist terrorism in Burma has to do with the difference between 969 and 768. Let me just drink some water. Okay. We finished reading one paper. Let's check out some other small papers. कितने पेज का है? The rhetoric of violence in Buddhist tantras. Hijacking Buddha Dharma, violence in Buddhist societies. Oh, just 7 pages. Yeah, ये भी check out कर लेते हैं. This will take a different approach from the other paper. तो ये जगह तो हमने पढ़ लिया. Yeah. So holy war and Buddhism. Buddhist का भी holy war है. A major cause, but the world is only concerned with Hindu fascism. A major cause of violence in contemporary societies is the claim that one religion is superior to others. And that's why there is no religious violence in India from the Hindu side, because we don't believe that we have a religion and it's superior to others. The allegiance to one true God or one religion is regarded as a basic foundation of some religious communities, and this is what exactly neo-Buddhist, neo-Ambedkarites think of their religion as, and that is why they indulge in these acts, and that is not inherently what Hindus believe, and that is why we don't indulge in these acts. But fear and hatred can foster intolerant views, and some use religion to legitimize violent actions. Invoking holy war leaves out the power of religion to accomplish change through non-violent means. Do Buddhist ethics espouse a distinctive approach to non-violence? Although some scholars argue that there is no single Buddhism and instead we should talk about many Buddhisms, one can find in the Pali Canon as well as in Mahayana Sutras a clear set of key ideas developed and taught by the Shakyamuni Buddha since the 6th century BCE. For example, the frequent references to the 3 marks of existence, the 5 precepts, the 4 noble truths, and the 12 nidanas are beyond all cultural and historical particularities that we can find in the so-called Buddhisms. In fact, any Buddhist movement or group that is not in accordance with these core concepts can hardly be regarded as Buddhist, especially those who interpret Buddha Dharma to justify the perpetuation of suffering through violence and war. And remember, Ambedkar also rejected a few core tenets and then called himself a Buddhist. The Buddha established that, quote, whoever tries to seek happiness through hurting others cannot find happiness. It's a great quote in itself. Buddhism is great for quotes at least. Moreover, the Tathagata, literally one who has attained suchness or realization of the inherently empty nature. Empty nature of what? Empty nature of valence. Empty nature of phenomena. Okay. A term used in Buddhism to refer to the Buddha affirms that happily do we live without hate amongst the hateful. Amidst the hateful men, we dwell unhating. Thus, the pillars of the Buddhist path are rooted in love and compassion, not in violence and war. Buddha's teachings constantly instructed followers to avoid killing and, most of all, to overcome personal and collective suffering. If war and violence are causes of more suffering, then they are not logical, desirable, or ethical. The Buddha established victory breeds hatred, the defeated live in pain. Happily, the peaceful live, giving up victory and defeat. वाह वाह वाह, ये तो एकदम गांधी जी का कोट है. How can someone convert from Hinduism to Buddhism if someone says these things? This is inherently, implicitly a stupid thing to say. This is an eternal law. Okay. Happily the peaceful live, giving up victory and defeat. Because hate is not overcome by hate. By love, metta alone is hate appeased. This is an eternal law. To kill a living being is to break the first of the 5 precepts that all Buddhists should follow as part of their journey towards enlightenment. Therefore, to kill a person will bring negative karmic consequences if the killer is aware of the living being, intends to kill, carries out the act, and causes death. Therefore, if one of the goals of the Buddhist path is to overcome suffering and also to help others overcome suffering, the mere idea of causing more suffering through violence and war contravenes this basic goal. This is true even if violence is somehow justified, so-called justified, as protecting the quote-unquote 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddhist holy wars, or any kind of war and violence, are thus not consistent with core ideas of Buddhism, which emphasize that inner peace is a prerequisite for external peace. This is a great thing to say. Wholesome thoughts based on compassion and loving kindness will produce beneficial consequences of altruism, integration, and communality. So see, whatever good things that seems to be coming out from Buddhism were inherently or historically Hindu concepts. Because this is what they just said, that why do we need to chant some things or particular like Om Bhurbhuva Swaha? Because it cleanses your mind, because you are in presence of a clean thought, a clean imagination. This is what Buddha is saying. तो बुद्धिस्ट का जो खराब चीज़ें आ रहा है वो बुद्धिस्ट लोग खुद बना रहे हैं, जो मैक्सिमम जो अच्छे चीज़ें आ रहे हैं वो हिंदुइज्म से आ रहे हैं. It seems like. Otherwise, the 3 poisons of the mind, anger, desire, and ignorance, and the 5 hindrances of sensual desire, ill will, sloth, worry, doubt, will produce unwholesome actions characterized by a violent outcome. So, ये जो डिज़ायर का बात है, रिमेंबर वी रेड इन मनुस्मृति दैट डिज़ायर विल ऑलवेज बी देयर. डिज़ायर गायब नहीं होगा. डिज़ायर को आप काउंटर बैलेंस कर सकते हैं, थोड़ा ऑफसेट कर सकते हैं विद द परसूट ऑफ द राइट नॉलेज. दैट्स व्हाट मनुस्मृति सेज. डिज़ायर दिमाग से हटा नहीं सकते आप. As a further refute to the claims of a quote-unquote holy war in Buddhism, the core doctrinal teachings found in the Pali Canon and most Mahayana Sutras do not condone war and violence. To the contrary, these acts are seen as an expression of a polluted mind that is influenced by anger, hatred, and delusion. The Buddha, it seems like they're describing Indian neo-Buddhists now. The Buddha insisted, conquer the angry man by love, conquer the ill-natured man by goodness, conquer the misery with generosity, conquer the liar with truth, conquer Hindus by making up batshit crazy history. Furthermore, there is no heavenly reward for those who commit a violent act or kill in the name of the 3 jewels. The karmic consequence of breaking the first precept is to be reborn in one of the hellish realms until the karmic burden of this action is extinguished. As presented in the Maharat Maharatnakuta Sutra, even when a great compassion bodhisattva killed a traitor in a previous life in order to prevent both the mass killing of his crewmen and bad karma for the perpetrator, his consequence was not a future rebirth in heavenly realms. Even that guy didn't go to heaven. One may interpret this as the justification of killing, observing that even the Buddha had to kill in a previous life. However, that interpretation overlooks all negative karmic results of such action. Another example of this non-violent, ये non-violent बोलते बोलते ये भी लिख दिया है कि बुद्धा ने पिछले जन्म में किसी को मार दिया था, जरूरत था, मारना पड़ा, क्या करे. Another example of this non-violent approach can be found in the story of Yodha Jiva Sutta. In this story, a warrior asked the Buddha, which warrior will ask Buddha? This is obviously they are talking about a Hindu Kshatriya. So a Kshatriya asked the Buddha if soldiers who die in the battlefield would be reborn in one of the heavenly realms. The Buddha answered that a warrior cannot be reborn in the heavenly realms as a consequence of dying in battle because his mental attitude has been polluted by hatred and delusion. ये देखो, ये बोल रहा है कि क्षत्रिय स्वर्ग में नहीं जाएगा. The Buddha answered, the Bodhisattva cannot attain enlightenment through a compassionate killing. The Buddha establishes that warriors who die in battle go not to heaven but to a special naraka, since at the moment of death their minds are intent on killing living beings. As a consequence, no war is compatible with Buddhism, and Buddhist warfare is a misnomer. These ideas are politicized faith phenomena that have nothing to do with the ontological compassionate nature of Buddha Dharma. Why is it then that we find sutras with some military imagery? Why is there an army of guardians protecting the Dharma, or the power of wisdom represented with a sword? Does this legitimize war, or is it an invitation for violence to protect the three jewels? In fact, the military imagery in the sutras is merely a means to express the discipline and conviction of a true practitioner. One does not have to protect one's practice against external enemies but from inner afflictive emotions. Also, to rely on the guardians of the Dharma is to pledge allegiance to the same conviction that others had in order to follow Buddha's teachings. In Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism, the sword is commonly used to represent the power of wisdom to cut the veils of ignorance. It is thus not an external weapon to hurt others. Buddhism betrayed by Buddhists. In Theravada Buddhism practiced in Sri Lanka, there is no canonical text that justifies violence. However, a particular chronicle, the Mahavamsha, describes how King Thagamani had to fight against the Tamil general Elara to free the island. In the text, the Buddha predicts that Buddhism would flourish in Sri Lanka, which some have mistakenly taken as a justification for Buddhist prominence. Following Sri Lankan independence, there was an effort to revive and strengthen the Sinhalese culture after the British privileged the Tamil minority during the colonial rule. In an attempt to revitalize Sinhalese Buddhist culture and society, the non-Buddhist Tamils have been excluded and even victimized. In addition, the colonial legacy of Tamil privilege caused many Sinhalese Buddhists to fear that their ancient tradition was endangered, with one Buddhist monk describing the Sinhalese Buddhist community as a teardrop, a grain of sand in an enormous sea. क्या बोल रहा है यहाँ पे? The colonial legacy of Tamil privilege caused many Sinhalese Buddhists to fear that their ancient tradition was endangered. Buddhist ka ancient tradition was endangered because of a more ancient tradition, and who are a minority. Sounds like jihad apology. Yeah. Describing the Sinhalese Buddhist community as a teardrop, a grain of sand in an enormous sea. Since 1983, an estimated 80,000 to 100,000 people have been killed in the civil war in Sri Lanka. Even after government forces reconquered all rebel-held territory in 2009, a fragile state of affairs remains. Throughout the conflict, prominent figures have drawn on Buddhist tradition to justify violence. For example, the Venerable Ampitiye Silavamsatisya contended that the karmic consequence of an act is in relation to his intention, chetana, and not the action itself. He similarly affirmed, chetana is the thing at the root. Soldiers don't take guns with the intention of killing. More than killing, they take them with the principal intention of saving the country, the race, and the religion. Although he is right by pointing out that karma is produced by the intentions behind actions, he overlooks that there is a subjacent attachment in fighting to save those identity tenets. While the first noble truth recognizes the existence of suffering, the second noble truth presents the cause of that suffering, which is desire or attachment to people or places or ideologies or religions. Therefore, the intention of the soldier to protect an object of attachment is rooted in the main cause of suffering, something that the Buddhist path tries to transcend and eventually resolve. That's why they can't have armies. They are not supposed to have armies. China se bhik mango. Thus, this is a misguided interpretation of core Buddhist principles and is an illustration of the problem of collective ego, one's own race, nation, gender, religion, etc. The attachment to a group ego can lead to violence in order to perpetuate the survival of the group, culture, or tradition. As the Venerable Sudarshana, a monk and former member of the military in Sri Lanka stated, intention, तो इनके जो theoretically they are kind of the Brahmins of their religion. Their Brahmins are having to become Kshatriyas क्योंकि इनका basic ideology इतना गोलमाल हो गया है कि कौन प्रोटेक्ट करे कि नहीं करे, अभी वायलेंस यूज़ करे सेल्फ डिफेंस में कि नहीं करे, ये समझ में ही नहीं आ रहा है कि हिंदुइज्म से कन्वर्ट होकर क्या उखाड़ लिया. So as the Venerable Sudarshana, monk and former member of the military in Sri Lanka stated, intentions become karma. Can a soldier shoot another person while practicing loving kindness meditation? If he were doing that, how could he kill? There is a clear contradiction in engaging in violent actions while following a Buddhist path. Moreover, as scholar Brian Dyson Victoria writes, at the very least, intellectual honesty and personal integrity should demand that they acknowledge that such a faith would have nothing to do with Buddhism, that such a faith would in fact be a clear denial of its core teachings, that such a faith needs to live in the protection of Hindus, Kshatriyas, the Indian army, which they hate. Therefore, a true practitioner or follower of the Buddha Dharma cannot condone, that is, encourage or support war and violence without breaking the core tenets of loving kindness and compassion. Accordingly, Anandavamsa, a Sri Lankan monk, affirms that monks should never tell soldiers to kill or impose suffering upon any living being. He stresses that we wouldn't say, may you have strength, may you defeat the army. We can't pray for that. Army को defeat नहीं करना चाहिए. ये है इनका ideology. देखो, how stupid is this line of thinking. May you have strength, may you defeat the army. We can't pray for that. If monks were to pray for that, they would face problems with the rule of monastic discipline. So देखो कितना घटिया monastic discipline है इनका. In the words of anthropologist Stanley Tambia, the monk who has finally taken to the gun can no longer be considered a vehicle of the Buddhist religion, since he has surrendered to his afflictive emotions and desires. If the greatest conquest of all is to conquer oneself, as Buddha affirmed, to engage in violent confrontations represents a defeat for the individual. According to Buddhism scholar Daniel Kent, to say that the killing of one's enemy is justified is a perversion of Buddhism, and those who encourage such acts have rejected their Buddhist heritage. Building bridges of understanding and creating proper conditions for constructing peace is the logical outcome of a compassionate mind. One that fully integrates the Buddha Dharma in his thoughts, emotions, and actions for the benefit of all beings. This provides a major opportunity to move beyond egotistical and rigid nationalistic interpretations of the other and build communality that can be found in Buddhist sacred texts. So, what I'm saying is that I'm obviously justifying the use of army, etc., but my problem is that they pretend like they came up with such an amazing new philosophical concept, which is the reinventing the wheel that leftist minded people always do. तो इनको लग रहा था कि 2500 में ये समझ इसके दिमाग में घुसा भी नहीं कि ये तो फिलोसॉफिकली यूजलेस है, प्रोटेक्शन के बिना कैसे रहेंगे. तो I forgot my train of thought. Wait, let me read this. Vinay Singh is saying Kushal Mehra knows Varna is just class system. As long as human exists, these 4 classes will exist. Yes, Varna is a class system. So yeah, so they are not realizing that it is an absolutely implausible, non-feasible theory, because you are not supposed to harm anyone ever, even in your self-defense. So iske liye all their frustration ends up being directed towards wrong people who have not done anything to them. जब कर रहे थे इनके अगेंस्ट तब कुछ नहीं कर पाए. चाइना के अगेंस्ट कुछ नहीं उखाड़ लिया. मुस्लिम इन्वेडर्स ने मार के भगा दिया, कुछ उखाड़ नहीं पाया. अभी जाके रोहिंग्या मुस्लिम्स को मार रहे हैं जिन्होंने कुछ नहीं किया है. उसके पहले भी उनको मार रहे थे जब वो लोग मतलब कुछ भी नहीं किए थे. अभी तो 1-2 रिटेलिएशन किए हैं और इंडिया में बैठ के हिंदू को गाली दे रहा है पूरा दिन. This provides a major opportunity to move beyond egotistical and rigid nationalistic interpretations of the other and build communality that can be found in Buddhist sacred texts. So, ये interpretations of the other is a basic nature of humans. Basic nature के against जब जाओगे कोई भी ideology बनाने में, तब वो effective नहीं होगा. One example of this effort in Sri Lanka is by the organization of Lanka Jatika Sarvodaya Shramadana Sangamaya Sarvodaya, founded by A.T. Aryaratne and rooted in a Buddhist compassion, but Aryans came later. Aryaratne and rooted in a Buddhist compassionate approach. The social awakening is, according to the Sarvodaya movement, a 6-dimension interdependent process at personal, family, village community, urban, national and global levels. This process of transformation, where economic, social and political changes will take place, should be supported by moral, cultural and spiritual elements rooted in compassion and loving kindness. The road ahead. Implications for Buddhist policy, politics, society and culture. Let's see. The recognition of shared values rooted in compassion and loving kindness within the Buddhist community is a reminder of a moral duty that should be expressed in everyday life. In light of this, how can one justify the violence towards the Rohingya Muslims in Burma? If there is a true conviction on the impermanence of reality and the need to get rid of all attachment, how can one justify a plea for independence in Tibet by young Tibetans at the expense of the 14th Dalai Lama's strategy of non-violence and request for autonomy rather than independence? If Buddhists are congruent with their own beliefs, they will build more tolerant and non-violent relations with other groups. They don't seem to have any plans for that. In Buddhist countries such as Sri Lanka, Burma and Bhutan, and other states with Buddhist populations like Japan and Korea, supporting inclusion and plurality, as well as dismissing attempts to use violence in any situation, can enrich public policy. It is important to remember that all political parties and states are formed by individuals who can choose to live by their ethical principles. In Buddhist culture, it is important to examine whether Buddhists are truly following the Buddha Dharma or are part of a new trend that largely disregards the basic beliefs and practice of Buddhism. This serves to remind all Buddhist practitioners that right mindfulness implies complete awareness of intentions, speech, and actions. This will foster deep changes in the consciousness of individuals and communities and help form more compassionate and inclusive Buddhist societies. पेपर शायद खत्म हो गया क्या यहाँ? Oh, we just finished reading 2 papers. Tattvabodhaka. If you have to thank one person for philosophically incapacitating Buddhists and making them theologically irrelevant, it is Kumarila Bhatta, who voiced vehemently for Vedic epistemology. I see. Is he an ancient scholar or a medieval scholar? I'll have to check him out then. Okay, so guys, today's session ends early because we read two papers, and the other paper is pretty big. Let's see how many pages. 2 of 7. क्या करे? Are you guys online? Then we'll finish this one as well. 7 pages का paper है ये. Let me tell me what to do. Buddhist extremism in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, an examination. ये एक और perspective हो सकता है because it's written by a Sri Lankan Buddhist, I'm guessing, Amresh Gunasingam. तो एक Buddhist scholar का भी perspective पढ़ लेते हैं. So we read the synopsis. So are you guys going to be online, right? Let's check out the introduction. Synopsis हमने पढ़ लिया है पहले. Across Asia, the rise of hardline religious movements, ये हिंदुओं को हिंट दे के बोल रहा है, is fueling an insular nationalism and exacerbating fault lines in interethnic and interreligious relations. This article examines violent incidents in Sri Lanka and Myanmar perpetrated by hardline Buddhist groups against Muslim minority communities, which indicate that a militant ultranationalist strand within a segment of Theravada Buddhism is on the rise. So, do you all know how to cast this page from my Google Meet? I can't figure this out. मेरा खुद का फेस नहीं दिखा पाऊंगा यहाँ लग रहा है, या ये नहीं होगा. पहले तो विंडोज स्क्रीन कनेक्शन देता था. ओ ये विंडो सिलेक्ट करना होगा. यस nice. Now it's working. Okay, let me zoom in a little. Sri Lanka and Myanmar have Buddhist majorities, about 75% and 90% of the population respectively, and both have sizable Muslim minorities. They don't actually have a sizable Muslim minority. It's sizable only in numbers from a Western perspective, but it's not. It's by percentage wise, it's a joke. Despite such, they have way less percentage of Muslims than India has, and Hindus have never done such things. Even if we have had violence from their side, we have had Kashmir, we have had Noakhali, we have had Direct Action Day, we have had Mopla, we have had okay, Gujarat was only retaliation. And sadhus getting beaten up in Kolkata. Sadhus were burnt alive. In Maharashtra, sadhus were beaten to death. Hindus not only don't retaliate, they forget even hitting the first blow. Hindus half the time don't even retaliate to legitimate situations. और बुद्धिज्म में तो वायलेंस है ही नहीं, ये खुद से ही ऐसे ही वायलेंस करते जा रहे हैं. तो let's be very careful of Buddhists. Despite such demographic majorities, the notion that Buddhism is under siege and in danger of being wiped out resonates with the Sinhalese and Bamar Buddhist majorities in both countries. Religious justification for the above-mentioned rhetoric is derived from distorted interpretations of Theravada Buddhism scriptures, which elevate the preservation and defense of Buddhism, the shasana, above other traditional Buddhist values such as peace and compassion. The defense of one's religion has also evolved from key themes related to cultural, national, and ethnic identity. Hardline Buddhist organizations such as Mabatha in Myanmar and BBS in Sri Lanka have exploited such narratives to advocate the protection and promotion of Buddhism. Protection किससे? Protection कम होने का जैसा तो कुछ हो ही नहीं रहा है. Preemptive strikes. The protection and promotion of Buddhism and the state against perceived threats from within and outside the country, and these are the people inspiring the new Ambedkarite Buddhists of India. Their rhetoric has partly been framed against Islamist movements involved in global terrorism and extremism that are seen as inherently violent and driven by an agenda to take over the country, wider region, and eventually the rest of the world. Yes, that is their plan, but ये पहले से करना is never ever ethically right. You have to always give the benefit of the doubt that पहले violence करने दो, then we will retaliate. और जिसका वायलेंस का कोई भी हिस्ट्री नहीं है उसको जाके मारते फिर रहा है. तमिल हिंदू को मार रहा है किस जस्टिफिकेशन से? यहाँ पे तो एक्सक्यूज दे रहा है कि ये तो मुस्लिम है, बामियान में तोड़ दिया, 9/11 किया इसलिए. तमिल हिंदुओं को क्यों मार रहा था? तो देयर रेटोरिक अगेंस्ट इस्लाम और मुस्लिम्स इज जस्ट एन एक्सक्यूज. ओके, it's just racism, pure racism. There's no actual religious justification. The December 2018 political crisis in Sri Lanka involving the country's president and prime minister, as well as escalating violence between Buddhist secessionist militias and Myanmar's military in Rakhine state, have prompted fresh fears of extremists stoking religious and ethnic tensions that could trigger violence. Okay. Tattva Bodhaka is saying Kumarila is pre-contemporary Adi Shankara period. Okay. Prachanda Mimamsaka, who self-immolated himself for learning, practicing Buddhism from Buddhist teachers, although he did that to condemn Buddhism. Buddhist extremism not only gave birth to terrorist Prabhakaran, but also made him a hero and voice of Tamils. Buddhist extremism has contributed significantly to expansion of Dravidianism. Oh. I did not know that. How? Can you explain a little in the comment section? Arjun Appadurai argues that for large-scale violence to occur between ethnic and religious groups who have lived together, there must be a combination of high certainty and uncertainty among the majority about the intentions of the other minority communities. In an era of globalization, which has eroded settled connections between territory and identity, a threatened majority can turn predatory by creating fears of a minority group taking over the country from the demographic majority. This hostile interpretation of the intentions of the other minority groups mobilizes the masses to use violence as a form of self-defense. In post-independence Sri Lanka, some scholars argue that Sinhala majoritarian influence has been legitimized through the electoral process by successive governments involving the two major political parties, the United Nation Party (UNP) and Sri Lanka Freedom Party. These developments fit within the larger trend of South Asian governments pursuing populist policies for political expediency since the end of colonial rule. In a region of myriad religious, cultural and ethnic identities, such attempts to reinforce a particular nationalism to win elections have adversely affected the peaceful coexistence of multiple identities. This is why the nation-state model is such a failed idea for otherwise civilizational states. But India seems to have figured it out mostly. For Sri Lanka, multiple issues including colonialism, a sense of Sinhalese Buddhist entitlement rooted in mythological history, economic grievances, and communal violence have contributed to a prevailing Sinhalese Buddhist majoritarian construct, which is also referred to as Sinhalese Buddhist nationalism. According to Neil Devotta, the Constitution plays a vital role in conditioning the degree of institutionalization and trajectory of ethno-nationalist narratives and intercommunal relations in nation states. Yes, the political structure of the is it though? Does the constitution play that role? Isn't it the civilizational memory of a particular country and how that behaves? I think it's not entirely correct. The political structure of the post-colonial constitution created in Buddhist majority Sri Lanka lacked specific minority guarantees and largely fulfilled a majoritarian agenda, he argues. ये देखो, see how opposite of Indian constitution it is. हमारा minority rights खत्म ही नहीं हो रहा है. Minority rights बढ़ते anti-Hindu rights तक पहुंच गया है. Key among the majoritarian features that aligned the state with a Sinhalese nationalist vision were revisions made to the constitution in 1972 and 78 that established Sinhala as the official language and accorded Buddhism the foremost place among religions in Sri Lanka, which the state was compelled to uphold. These and numerous other discriminatory education and economic policies sharpened the schisms of identity along linguistic lines, initially between the majority Sinhalese and minority Tamil. culminating in the 30-year-long civil war waged by Tamil ethnic separatists in the north and eastern parts of the island state. According to observers, the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam's subsequent defeat in 2009 only emboldened Sinhalese Buddhist nationalists, whose cause was given patronage by the then administration. Around the time Buddhist nationalism was emerging in Myanmar, radical Buddhist groups in Sri Lanka began targeting Muslim and Christian minorities with the use of hate speech and violence. This is what I'm saying. Their rhetoric against Rohingyas is just an excuse that Muslims है, ये तो हमेशा ये सब करते हैं अलग जगहों में, यहाँ पे भी ऐसा करेंगे शायद, इसलिए हमने मार दिया. तो ये हिंदू और क्रिश्चियंस के अगेंस्ट इनका क्या एक्सक्यूज है? So these are just excuses. There are no legitimate reasons to actually harm Rohingyas from the Buddhist side. Since 2014, sporadic attacks against Muslims in some towns have led to the loss of lives and destruction of property and places of worship. The BBS and other extremist Buddhist groups have propagated several myths of Muslim infringement on Sinhalese Buddhists and launched hate campaigns against Muslim communities, including attempts to abolish the system of halal certification for food and other other products produced in Sri Lanka. अभी ये स्कॉलर का जिसने ये आर्टिकल लिखा है वो ये तो खुद मार्क्सिस्ट होगा ही, उसका भी दिमाग भी हिल रहा है. What has got banning of halal certificate got to do with ending up killing a person who wants to eat halal? Where's the fucking connection? These have provided the ideological legitimacy. Yes, banning halal has given them the ideological legitimacy. वो नहीं था तो ideological legitimacy होता ही नहीं. This is how stupid these scholars are. We are reading this paper just for getting the data. Okay, we'll draw our own conclusions. Conclusions के पास लिए leftist के पास गए तो हो गया दिमाग का दही. These have provided the ideological legitimacy, banning of halal, legitimacy for Buddhist radicals to engage in acts of violence. वाह वाह वाह. Halal mat khao or mar jao. This is a jump in logical thinking that this particular scholar is doing. Notwithstanding debates on its sources of funding and links to the state, the BBS is an influential, well-funded and connected organization. And these are the things that Indian Buddhists don't have now. The day they have it because of leftists or Muslims or George Soros, they will want to do the same fucking things. इन्फ्लुएंशियल वेल फंडेड कनेक्टेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, ये तीनों चीजें इंडियन बुद्धिस्ट के पास नहीं है, इसलिए अम्बेडकराइट बोलते फिर रहे. बुद्धा से ज्यादा अभी अम्बेडकर से प्यार है उनको. Clergy's involvement in politics. This is also something that does not happen in India. Okay, let me drink a little bit of water and check out these 3 important comments that have come from Tattvabodhaka. Now the fans of Prabhakaran using the Aryan Dravidian theory demand for a separate Tamil state within India. Yeah. They argue that Aryan Hindus of the north oppressed Dravidian Tamils and hence want eradication or expulsion of Aryans from India. Either this or they want secession. अच्छा, इंडिया में अलग स्टेट चाहिए, श्रीलंका में मार पड़ रही है तो इंडिया में आना आ रहा. एक्सक्यूज कोई अगर एक बार देना शुरू करे तो वो खत्म नहीं होता है. The clergy's involvement in politics. हमारा clergy involved नहीं होता है. We have just one Yogi Adityanath, whose entire organization has the mutt has no connection with BJP or the government whatsoever. But here we are seeing direct religious organizations being in the government. Following independence, the Buddhist Sangh or monastic order has also engaged in politics and exercised influence through linkages with political parties. It is customary for Sri Lankan politicians to play up their religious affiliations, and leading members of the clergy are publicly consulted on policy matters. The clergy has The clergy has also participated in public discourse through intermediary movements composed of lay people and monks. The 3 most important clergy-linked political parties in Sri Lanka are the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, National Liberation Front, a breakaway faction of the JVP, and the Jathika Hela Urumaya JHU. Recent iterations with different versions, although of a more radical bent, include BBS and the Ravana Balaya, Ravan Balay, also known as the Ravan Force. वाह वाह वाह, रावण को पसंद आ गया अभी. This is why they are inherently anti-Hindu. Rise of Mabatha in Myanmar. Since 2012, the violence between the majority Buddhist and minority Muslim communities, which began in West Rakhine, has spread across Myanmar. Following a series of military operations in Rakhine State, more than 7 lakh Rohingya Muslims have fled to Bangladesh. They have not fled to Bangladesh, they wanted to flee to Bangladesh. Bangladesh kicked them out and sent them to India. The government says the crackdown was in response to attacks by Rohingya militants on a military camp and security forces outposts, and they were doing that as a retaliation to other Buddhist atrocities. You have to, okay, Tattva Bodhaka is saying you have to check out lectures of Professor Vaidyanathan IMB Anna. Okay, Anna. There are lots of similarities between Bengal and Tamil Nadu native. Yes, I have noticed that. Actually, the Bengali nationalist, it's not nationalist, it's Bengal sectarian religious regional pride thing that they're doing, Bangla Pakko. They have direct inspirations from Dravidian politics, and they don't try to hide it much. Afin is saying, by the way, I saw Mullah come by a private helicopter and took all the chanda that their community had gathered, and here our pujari come by riding a bike. Yes, ashraf privilege. Okay. Following, अच्छा 7 लाख रोहिंग्या को बाहर निकाल दिया, excuse दे दिया. The crisis in the Rakhine state has been exploited by radical Buddhist nationalists to promote a majoritarian and exclusivist agenda, which exactly is being followed by Indian Buddhists, which has led to several incidents of violence around the country. Unlike Islamist terror groups, these groups focus more on protests, propaganda, and in extreme cases, intimidation and violence. One of the most prominent ultranationalist movements is the Organization for the Protection of Race and Religion, or Mabatha, which is estimated to have hundreds of thousands of monks and also common people from across the country as members. Although it insists that it seeks to promote Buddhist principles of peace and harmony, Mabatha has become a crucial source of support for hardline ethno-nationalists who have successfully lobbied for, among other things, several controversial laws designed to protect Buddhist concerns but viewed by religious minorities as discriminatory to their interests. Many claims made by the Mabatha in the form of sermons, statements, and publications feed into larger scripts which tap on broader sentiments of Islamophobia playing out globally. Global Islamophobia to without any reason ho raha hai. Most of the Myanmar Buddhist majority do not recognize the existence of a Rohingya identity, and there are entrenched perceptions that the border Muslim population has grown at the expense of the Buddhists, particularly in the Rakhine state. How? Magically? Forced conversion वगैरह कुछ नहीं हुआ, ऐसे ही आ गए और ऐसे ही Buddhist population कम हो गया, खा गए उनको क्या? According to the international crisis groups such as Mabatha claim, among others, that Myanmar is under threat from a powerful global Islamic movement perceived to have substantial commercial clout and which for centuries has used violence to extend its influence, and this is nothing but a goddamn lie and a fucking excuse, because they are doing the same things to Christians, Hindus and Dravidians. This has already brought about the Islamization of previously Buddhist areas such as Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Indonesia, they claim. Okay. Tattva Bodhaka is saying Dravidians idolize Ravana, calling him a leader of the Dravidians who was unjustly oppressed by Aryan Rama. Yes. That's a long time. Okay, in Bengal, Marxists, some commies go around saying now it's being countered even by Marxists themselves that Mahishasur was the Dravidian tribal leader who was being killed by Aryan Durga. All the literature and intellectual material for Dravidians of Tamil Nadu came from Karnataka. However shocking that may be to believe. Okay, so I thought Dravidian literature came from Periyar. Is Periyar from Karnataka? There was a Buddhist-like movement in Karnataka, spearheaded by a 12th century intellectual. Okay. Myanmar's state and clergy nexus. Okay, we discussed Sri Lanka's state and clergy nexus. Now Myanmar state and clergy nexus. See, this is why you need to read papers written by people, even if they're commies. We are seeing a nice arrangement of facts. Conclusions खुद ड्रॉ कीजिए. Conclusions इनका लिया तो खत्म. A critical thinking. Historically, the relationship between the state and religion in Myanmar has been characterized by mutual dependence. Charles Keyes notes that the military often sought to demonstrate public relationships with Buddhist sacred rites and sites, particularly stupas, which are thought to contain relics of the Buddha and the Sangha. This has led to criticism by some scholars that political power is bound up in religious affiliation, whereby Buddhism is being used to legitimize the ruling political power, while ethnic and religious minorities undergo systematic exclusion. The military's operation against the Rohingya minority in the Rakhine state appears to have revived its public image domestically. Prior to the enactment of democratic reforms, the military had long targeted dissidents, minority ethnic groups, and monks involved in protest movements such as the Saffron Revolution of 2007. Now, notice this, that they are targeting minority ethnic groups. Okay, it's not just minority because of religion. They just hate other people, other races. Indian Buddhists hate Hindus because of their comic book history that they have made up. Myanmar's political transition has also relaxed restrictions on freedoms of speech and assembly, which have allowed the country's roughly 5 lakh monks to preach freely. Several radicals, including prominent Mabatha leader Ashin Wirathu, the guy in my thumbnail, have exploited the open climate to spread an exclusivist and extremist agenda. Most are careful to avoid open calls to violence. Instead, they attend and speak at mass rallies and demonstrations where they stoke anti-Muslim sentiments and preach pro-Buddhist affirmative action. This is the one thing I will never agree to if it happens in India in case of Hindus. Pro-Hindu affirmative action agar hua, laws and policies that are made to directly benefit Hindus, overtly it's made to do that, then Hindus will have problems. Those policies always make that community which they are trying to help, make them weak, make them have false incentives, make them depend on the government for absolutely no reason. That breaks up their community, that breaks up their families. Hindus are still strong and skilled at things and educated because we have no pro-Hindu affirmative action, okay? Muslims are screwed, black people are screwed in America because they have those communities affirmative actions. I hope no one ever calls for pro-Hindu affirmative action in India. Okay. Periyar was from Tamil Nadu, okay. Is Dravidians in Karnataka too? If yes, how strong are they? Mallikarjun Kharge is from Karnataka, who is staunch Dravidianist. Oh, okay. You will have to read more about the Veerashaiva Lingayat movement. I have heard a little bit of about Lingayat just from Abhijit and Mitra and all, because Karnataka chief minister is Lingayat, I guess. They reject the Vedas, but they consider themselves Hindus happily. That's what I have heard about Lingayats. So, where did we go? So yeah, pro-Buddhist affirmative action. Affirmative action should never happen. Their rhetoric calls on Buddhists to refrain from buying from Muslim-owned shops. Yes. इसके साथ violence का संबंध क्या है? Socializing with Muslims. अच्छा, Muslims के साथ socialize भी मत करो. And also allowing their children to marry Muslims. ये देखो. So, for his part, Wirathu has continually denied links to hardline Buddhist elements in the country, accused of harnessing the nationalism of his movement to rally support for political purposes. The growing resonance of ethno-nationalist sentiments has complicated efforts by Aung San Suu Kyi's government, which swept to power in 2015, to curtail Mabatha and other extremist groups. In the Rakhine state, human rights groups have criticized the state's perceived inaction against Rohingya oppression, while Buddhist nationalists accuse the government of being soft on Muslim agitators. The recent upsurge in Bamar nationalism induces a disturbing new dynamic to Myanmar's religious political conflict, and there is a concern that while the Myanmar authorities are waiting for Mabatha to fade away, it continues to sink its roots further and has endangered an already fragile political transition. I want to mention here something that notice that how easy it is for an outsider, for a non-Indian or a non-Hindu scholar to conflate that, yeah, same things seem to be happening in India as well. So sabko dalo ek bucket mein and discuss then. Only and only a Hindu Indian can understand how this is different, how these two things are different. What the Buddhists are doing in Myanmar and Sri Lanka versus what Hindutva is saying in India. Okay, so what Afin was saying, that we realize that we should realize that we are alone in the world, and notice how true that is. Only you and only you, an Indian Bharatiya Hindu, will understand that there are subtle differences, key tweaks that we have in our movement, which helps us prevent things like this, or which will hopefully make sure that we never head to this direction. This is why we are alone, and we must just accept that we are alone. Coalition or allies ka din khatam. Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Okay, lots of comments are coming. Let me just check this out. Lingayatism, okay. Wait. Harsh is saying we just need to revive our institution. We have dealt with these problems since thousands of years. Yes. Organizations and non-state organized. Tattva Bodhaka is saying M.M. Kalburgi is the foremost authority on Lingayatism. Though I do not agree with his Dravidian views one bit, I respect him to the core for unabashedly putting forth Lingayat works as they are. I see. I don't live in Karnataka. Anna, kindly read the work Warriors of Shiva, Basava Purana by Narayana Rao. Okay. But I have gone to place. Okay. Dravidians of Karnataka idolize 4 people: Buddha, Basava, Ambedkar, Periyar. So, Karnataka में भी Dravidian. हाँ होगा तो. Yeah, even not Tripura. Yeah, even Tripura's Bengalis and even Assam, Meghalaya's Bengalis, they are gradually becoming those Dravidian-inspired regionalist secessionists. उनके बातों में से लग रहा है कि ऐसे चीज़ें पसंद है उनको कि हाँ हम तो हमें बंगाली में एक किंग एक ज़मींदार था राजा प्रतापादित्य, ऐसे ही खुद का नाम राजा भी रख लिया, प्रतापादित्य भी रख लिया. उसको लेकर बंगाली नेशनलिस्ट बहुत फुदकते हैं, मगर उनका कोई हिस्ट्री नहीं है. आई हैव चेक्ड द सो कॉल्ड नेशनलिस्ट हिस्टोरियंस लाइक जदुनाथ सरकार's works on that person and the Bengali region and the Marxist perspective on that person. Both have said that this guy was just a zamindar, but Bengali regionalist superiorists believe that this guy was a great Bengali king. Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. You guys can check out the comment section. Oh, that was in Bengali, but the Bengalis listening to this can check out my comment section in my video called Why Bengalis Are Secular. There one Bengali superiorist, Bengali nationalist, Bengali what do we call them? Bengal superiority guy came and said that why aren't you talking about King Pratapaditya? So then I did my research and gave him quote after quote after quote. So see, this is what the scholars are saying. There's not one single legitimate source claiming that there was a king called Pratapaditya and he was great. He goes on saying that, oh, so you hate Bengalis, etc. Oh, so you want to run away from this topic. Both Sri Lanka and Myanmar are bound by common historical circumstances that witnessed Buddhist revivalist movements fueling ethno-nationalistic sentiments as a response to colonial occupation. These sentiments helped both countries achieve independence. In the contemporary context, both countries have gone through rapid economic and political transitions in the last decade. In 2011, Myanmar initiated democratic and economic reforms after 50 years of a military dictatorship, while Sri Lanka's civil war only ended in 2009. These unique circumstances provided the necessary conditions for Buddhist extremism to proliferate around the same time in both countries. BBS are also among several groups that have close ties to Myanmar's Buddhist extremists and are known to use similar rhetoric and tactics. And I hope the Indian intelligence departments are keeping track of Indian Buddhist organizations who are who are slowly increasing the knob of their intensity, and it needs to be checked if they are in contact with the Buddhist extremists of Sri Lanka and Myanmar. This has led observers such as Alan Keenan of the International Crisis Group to warn that events in Myanmar, where Rohingya Muslims have faced persecution in and expulsion from the country, could further empower radical Buddhist groups in Sri Lanka. So how do we know it's not going to empower radical Buddhist groups in India? Because they don't have a radical Buddhist group in India as of yet, or not that we know of. The day they have these, they are coming for us. Do you realize? I'm not fear mongering. Okay, even if I'm fear mongering, this is based on legitimate things. I'm quoting Marxist scholars to claim that yes, Hindus are the threat even from Buddhists. It's just that they don't have the enough money and manpower as of yet. In a sign of growing coordination of interests, Buddhist groups have attacked Rohingya refugees in the capital Colombo and vowed to drive them out of the country. However, some differences rooted in their respective domestic circumstances are apparent. The direct participation of Buddhist monks in Sri Lankan national politics arguably puts Sri Lanka's version of Theravada Buddhism in a different league than its counterparts in Myanmar, where rules limit monks from participating in politics. In the 2004 parliamentary elections, a Buddhist-dominated JHU party fielded an entire slate of monks. 9 were elected, marking a first in Sri Lanka. These groups have also emerged as major players in coalition building and legislation making in Sri Lanka. For example, an alliance with the JHU enabled the then ruling United People's Freedom Alliance to secure an absolute majority in the 2004 general election. Counter narratives and outlook. Okay, this is the last sub-chapter of the paper. We'll get to that. Let me just check out some more comments again. Lots of comments and lots of people still joining now. Okay. So Tattva Bodhaka is saying Dravidians of Karnataka idolize 4 people. Yeah. Ex-Buddhist is saying so they need same treatment like Buddhists. Shravyamin is saying wasn't Basaveshwara himself a Shaivite? Okay, Tattva Bodhaka is saying but ones in South Karnataka are utterly dangerous yet true and loyal adherents of the system. Okay, you will have to read the Vachanas of Bashava. His idea of Shiva was entirely different from the Vedic Puranic Shiva. Okay, in what way? And is he a Dravidianist as well? And that is why people say Cholas were not Hindus even if they were Shiva worshippers. Maybe because of this interpretation. Vedic Puranic Shiva is already different. Rigvedic Rudra is also different from later Vedic Shivas. Lingats need belt treatment. Why? They are doing nice things. The thing is, in Bengali-speaking Hindus had been on the back foot, and the Bengali-speaking Muslim were the Hindus that bent over backwards to Turks and converted Rajputs. Okay, ex-Buddhists, no, they need to be brought back to strict Hindu Shaiva Parampara. For those interested in knowing more about Basava and his Lingayatist movement, kindly refer to Warriors of Shiva, Basava Purana by Narayana Rao. It's in English, a must read. Tattva Bodhaka, do one thing. When we are done with this live stream, or anytime later, post some links to small articles or scholarly papers. Go to JSTOR and find some articles and post them in the comment section here, okay? So later when I get into these topics, we'll get into these topics as well in our weekly paper discussions. We'll discuss these as well. Get us some interesting stuff from Karnataka. Basava Purana is a 12th 13th century work by poet Pallukudi Somanatha, probably a later a contemporary of Basava. Ex-Buddhist saying BJP is choosing Lingayat leaders as head in Karnataka. We need a proper Shiva Hindu CM to their Gharwapsi. Yeah, everyone needs a Kyannamalai, and everyone can't have their Kyannamalai. Everyone wants to have a Jaisai Deepak in their state, but ye to khud ko banana hoga. Like this is why I listen to Major Gaudavaria. He gave a very nice answer to a question that Pakistani guys was saying that हमको मोदी दे दो. मोदी अगर पाकिस्तान का पीएम होता तो ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता. तो मेजर गौड़ावारिया said that see every society needs to create their own modis. तो पाकिस्तान के पास तो इतने अच्छे लोग थे, आपने लात मार के भगा दिया इतनों को, तो और एक मोदी आके क्या हो जाता. एंड yesterday I was hearing from somewhere else that, oh yeah, one Pakistani YouTuber was viral on Facebook yesterday. I was saying that they were discussing how India's IT is so advanced compared to Pakistan, and they were saying that, see, we have about 20. Our problem is not money or wealth in the country. We have about 20 families, or let's say even 10. If we have 10 extremely rich families, और 11 हो जाएगा तो क्या क्या हो जाएगा. इट्स द सोसाइटी दैट्स एब्सोल्युटली स्क्रूड अप. सोसाइटी को बनाना पड़ेगा ये आदमी. सोसाइटी को बना के वो होगा, मैजिकली कुछ नहीं होगा. ओके ओके, बहुत क्वेश्चंस आ गए, बहुत बहुत कमेंट्स आ गए. ओके ओके, नाइस. सो यू गाइज आर हैविंग अ ग्रेट डिस्कशन, सो यू कंटिन्यू दिस डिस्कशन. I'll complete the paper here. It's the last sub chapter. Then I'll read the comments. Counter narratives and outlook. The majority Buddhist communities and clergy in both Sri Lanka and Myanmar are not monolithic, and many have criticized the actions of a fringe minority of extremists. There are several examples, both on social media and on the streets, of public sermons and demonstrations by those championing peaceful coexistence and an end to violence. Proactive state actions such as the 2018 prosecution of BBS leader Galagoda Athete Gyanasara in Sri Lanka is also a positive step, but strong measures are needed for others who instigate violence. There is also an urgent need for efforts to promote and protect peaceful narratives of coexistence. Political leaders will have to forge a national identity that is inclusive and ensures that the sentiments of all ethnic groups can be articulated. And this is what India is. We have already done this. We have always have had it. That is why none of the things that Buddhists do elsewhere, Muslims do elsewhere, Christians do elsewhere cannot be extrapolated on the Hindu psyche, Hindu society, Hindu mind, or a Hindu Rashtra. This is why, because this is the inherent nature of a Hindu civilization. In a rare and positive move, Sri Lanka's current House Speaker Karu Jayasuriya acknowledged at a public conference in December 2018 that religious and ethnic extremism was re-emerging and urged the country's various communities to play their part to stop this trend by not allowing politicians to spread extremism using temples and other places of worship. More leaders should take the lead in these efforts by speaking out. And if an outsider is thinking about this, they will obviously think that this is the same thing that's going on in India. And that's why you as a Hindu, as a Bharatiya Hindu, are absolutely alone. Realize that and understand how this is different from the Indian context. More leaders should take the lead in these efforts by speaking out. Other challenges to address include poor socio-economic conditions of the significant rural populace in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, और poor ही रहेंगे. Rising income inequality. ये इनका स्टैट्यूटरी वार्निंग है. जैसे कि कुछ राइट विंगर्स का है कि कोई भी प्रॉब्लम बोल देंगे कि बॉर्डर पे जवान लड़ रहे हैं. ये मार्क्सिस्ट का ये है कि गरीब लोगों को खाना नहीं मिल रहा है, तुमको ये चाहिए वो चाहिए. और ये पॉवर्टी है, इनकम इनइक्वालिटी. जैसे सिगरेट के बॉक्स पे लिखा होता है कि स्मोकिंग इज इंजूरियस टू हेल्थ. जो हो जाए, सिगरेट पियो नहीं पियो, ये तुमको एक बार देखना ही पड़ेगा. मूवी में जाओ, सिगरेट स्मोकिंग इज इंजूरियस टू हेल्थ. तो इनका वैसे ये सेंटेंस है, राइजिंग इनकम इनइक्वालिटी. राइजिंग इनकम इनइक्वालिटी कैसे राइज हो रहा है? पूरा देश गटर में है. किसका इनकम इनइक्वालिटी बढ़ रहा है? जो ये इनइक्वालिटी जो डिफरेंस हुआ, गैप इन द इनइक्वालिटी, गैप इन द इनकम, ये गैप कैसे हुआ? अगर कोई भी किसी का भी इंप्रूवमेंट नहीं हो रहा है, पूरा देश तो गटर में है. तो आइदर इनकम इनइक्वालिटी हो रहा है एंड पूरा देश प्रॉस्परस बन रहा है, in which case the poverty is also decreasing, or the lifestyle of the poor people is improving. Or if the entire country is gutter, there can be no income inequality. Inequality तो तब होगा जब किसी का बढ़ेगा, किसी का नहीं बढ़ेगा. यहाँ पे देश अगर गटर में है तो किसका बढ़ रहा है? कैसे बढ़ रहा है? इनको इनकम इनइक्वालिटी डालना है. मैं मार्क्सिस्ट हूँ, पेपर लिख रहा हूँ. इनकम इनइक्वालिटी नहीं डालूंगा तो मेरा वर्ण खराब हो जाएगा. ये इनका क्लास, ये है बेसिकली मार्क्सिस्ट का कास्टिज्म. ये इनका कास्ट बिट्रियल बन जाएगा, इसलिए ये डाल दिया. Socio-economic conditions of the significant rural population in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. There are challenges to these things. Rising income inequality and social unrest could fan a broader conflict in mainstream society. Rising income inequality, ये favorite phrase है इनका. Islamophobia or rising income inequality. Both governments need to sustain counteractions against radical Buddhist narratives and agitation and address perceived and real socio-economic grievances of the affected communities. Yes. Failure to do so could see hate speech and political violence proliferate and spread across the region. Okay, check this out. They are applying the same. I'm blaming the author of this paper right now. Is saying the same thing they say when it comes to Islamic violence in India. Socio-economic grievances को address करो, नहीं तो terrorism आ जाएगा. Why doesn't this ever apply to Hindus? Never. In 7,000 years, 8,000 years. गरीब है हिंदू इसलिए जाके किसी को मार दिया. Why doesn't this ever occur? They never wonder. They just think that must be that गरीब है इसलिए मार दिया जाके किसी को. Failure to do so could see hate speech and political violence proliferate and spread across the region. Thailand, for example, could be vulnerable to such cross-border influences. Another Buddhist majority country, Thailand, has seen anti-Muslim sentiments on the rise owing to factors such as the persistent activities of Muslim separatist groups operating in the south of the country. तो हमारा सेपरेटिस्ट ग्रुप नहीं है, हमारे यहाँ गरीब हिंदू नहीं है, हम कौन सा ये चीज कर रहे हैं? In a social media age, the extremist groups are increasingly relying on open and closed social media platforms to interact with one another. These social media platforms then amplify false narratives that may ultimately lead to more violence. Yes, Indian Buddhists are absolutely victims of this. They have made up their own history, just like Bangladeshis have made up their own history. The plight of the Rohingya and other Muslim communities could also be exploited by terrorist groups such as the ISIS and Al-Qaeda, obviously, to call for attacks in Myanmar and Sri Lanka, thus expanding their theater of operations further into South and Southeast Asia. So ये आदमी कौन है? Amresh Gunasingam is an associate editor with the International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research, a specialist unit within the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore. Yes. And he's definitely a Marxist because सब कुछ के अंत में ये rising income inequality घुसा दिया है. कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो, rising income inequality is the problem. गरीब लोग हमेशा चूतिए होंगे. ये है मार्क्सिस्ट का थीसिस बेसिकली. गरीब है हरामीगिरी करेंगे, गरीब है लोगों को मार देंगे, इसलिए गरीब मत रहने दो. दिस इज देयर थीसिस. गरीब्स are fucking assholes. That is the Marxist thesis. Okay, let me check out some comments and then we'll end the live stream. Afin is saying, dude, after Basava, his Sangha literally wrote, anyone that doesn't bow before to Shiva, same should be done as was done to Daksha. You know that, right? Cholas are 100% Hindus, Anna. They, yeah, of course. They describe themselves Shivapada Sevaka. Wow. But if their Shiva is different, then they will consider that I am the Sevaka of the kind of Shiva who is not Hindu. That might be used as an excuse by Dravidians, right? They built temples and followed all rituals. Basava was against temple worship and rituals. That is exactly what I'm talking about, Anna. Exactly. Jain massacre was justified by Basava. There are records. Many Jain basadis were destroyed and materials were used to erect Lingayat icons. Iconoclasm was justified. Killing for purity, Basava Purana. Oh. Whatever anti-Brahmanism you see now clearly had a leader who spread it across South India. It is not overnight that anti-Brahmanism came into Tamil Nadu. Yeah, of course. Periyar wasn't the first one. Okay. Periyar was a culmination of many other things. He was inspired by someone else. हाँ, ऐसे ही होता है. Just like Bihar. यहाँ maximum लोग गरीब है जबकि we have had socialist government for continuous 30 years. Government में आके तो इनसे inequality हटी नहीं. Yes. Tattva Bokodaka, who started anti-Brahmanism? Okay, kindly read the book that I've suggested. You will get all your answers. Okay. And please put the name or link to scholars, more such scholarly papers, and link to the book as well, if you can, in the comment section. Not in the live chat section, in the comment section of the video, okay? Okay, guys, thanks a lot for coming to this live stream. We'll end our discussion here. And tomorrow, what are we doing tomorrow? History of Indian philosophy, Friday night. We are going to enjoy our weekend discussing history of Indian philosophy and Arthashastra Saturday night. Tomorrow we'll continue with Surendra Dasgupta's paper. That was a fascinating read that we were having. Thanks a lot for joining. Okay, Apubos is saying, what are you going to say about BJP's win in Northeast? Yeah, BJP needs to be involved in the government somehow so that it doesn't become more anti-Hindu and more anti-Hindu. I just have heard that they have won in coalition, but they didn't win in Meghalaya, which is a problem. Nagaland, they won Nagaland, right? And Nagalims for Christ, Christ is the longest running secessionist movement in India. So it's very important that they stay in power there. How many seats did they get? 12, I think. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Okay, guys. So see you tomorrow discussing history of Indian philosophy. Thanks a lot for joining.